You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is about the lesser of two evils, when the nice in-law isn't so nice. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws, while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hello, welcome to this week's episode. I am Miriam Susan, your host, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that one of my listeners requested some information on, and that is the other in-law. The other in-law that is not the one that tends to be the focus of our exasperation, of our prayers that we're crying out to God about. This is the other in-law. And the scripture reference for today comes from the book of Galatians, chapter 1, verse 10. And this is from the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic Edition. And it says, "Am I now seeking human approval or God's approval? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still pleasing people, I would not be a servant of Christ." So today we're going to be talking about this topic that might make you squirm a little bit, and that is the in-law who seems nicer compared to the obviously toxic one. And there is this confusion factor that comes with this dynamic where one in-law is clearly the problem, while the other one seems more rational, more reasonable, but something still feels a little off about the quote nicer one, and you can't quite put your finger on it. You might find yourself thinking things like, well, at least they're not as bad as my father-in-law. But what this does is it creates this internal confusion in our minds, because then we feel guilty for having not so nice, uncharitable, negative feelings about someone who isn't that bad. So we need to take some time and ask ourselves, why do we feel like we need to rank our in-laws from bad to worse? And in my situation, it would seem like my father-in-law is the nicer one. He was never the one to be super passive aggressive. He does have his flaws, like we all do, but they seem to be more socially acceptable, or they seem to be ones that, like I was saying, it's in comparison to the things that my mother-in-law would do, they didn't seem as bad. So here's the issue with all this. There is some subtle sabotage, and maybe it's intentional and maybe it's not. But the lesser evil in-laws behavior might look something like staying completely silent when you're attacked by the toxic one. It might be something like making an innocent comment that still leaves you feeling really small. It might be going along with the more toxic in-laws' boundary violations because it's easier on them. Or it might be playing peacekeeper in ways that actually protect this toxic, dysfunctional system that you're stuck in. And so all of these things are not good. They're not good in and of themselves. But because we're playing this comparison game between the two, the one doesn't seem quite as bad. And so we tell ourselves stories like, well, they're just trying to keep the peace. One thing that my husband and I would say over and over again is, what choice does he have? What choice does my father-in-law have? He either does what we ask in terms of a boundary, in terms of whatever, and then faces the wrath of my mother-in-law because he's not doing the same thing she does, or he just goes along with it. And another thing you might be thinking is, well, maybe they just don't want to cause drama. But we have to take note that their peace comes at the cost of our boundaries. There are many times that your other in-laws' niceness or going along with it, not rocking the boat, has actually made things harder for you. One of the hardest things that my husband had to deal with was just trying to talk to his dad about the situation that we were in. And this goes back decades. I mean, I'm talking at least like the first time I remember my husband specifically talking to his dad about what we were going through and some suggestions that a Christian psychologist gave to my husband about what he may be dealing with in his mom. My father-in-law just sat there and he agreed with my husband. And so my husband left this conversation with his dad feeling like, okay, this is awesome. Dad gets it. He's not taking sides, but he gets it. He acknowledges that these things are happening. He acknowledges that there's some behavior that is not healthy. He felt good. He felt like he had a good man-to-man, heart-to-heart talk with his dad. Until his dad went home, and we know, if you've been through this situation, you probably know what happened. My mother-in-law got to talking with her husband. She pulled everything out of him. And then the next thing you know, my father-in-law is coming back to my husband and telling him, your mom is a good mother. All these things that you're saying about her are wrong. They're not true. And it was like, what just happened? And I feel like it was almost worse that my husband had these conversations that he thought went well and then turned around and everything was kind of thrown back into his face instead of him just saying, no, you're wrong from the get-go. Then my husband wouldn't have this feeling of sabotage, like that he just went and opened up to his dad. He was very honest. He thought he had a heart-to-heart. And then it was like his dad just stabbed him in the back by spilling the beans to his wife, which I'm not suggesting that we should try to turn one in-law against the other. No, I'm not saying that at all. But it felt like it was just a total abuse of what my husband had shared in those conversations for my father-in-law to then share everything with his wife, knowing that it would hurt her, knowing that it would cause more drama, and then the thing just explodes even more. So if you have this kind of scenario, you are probably very familiar with this kind of situation where one does something like this. Maybe it gets you to share information only to turn around and use it against you. Now, having one clearly bad or clearly toxic in-law gives you someone obvious to focus on. But that becomes kind of a game of distraction because it keeps you from seeing the real issue and that it's not just one person's personality. It's about this whole family structure, this whole family system that doesn't respect your marriage, your family, or your role as a mother, or probably even your husband's role as head and father of your family. So while you are busy focusing and trying to walk on eggshells and keep the peace with the quote unquote bad one, you're not able to focus on addressing the systemic problems that lie within this family culture. And the nice one gets this free pass to continue participating in these unhealthy patterns. So we need to sometimes take a step back and think, what am I not seeing when I'm focused on the worse or more toxic in-law? Then we have the stories that we tell ourselves. And these are the ones that almost punish us more because we ruminate on them and we cut ourselves down and we speak badly about ourselves to ourselves in our minds. And the stories we tell ourselves are almost just as bad as the toxic behavior we're experiencing from our in-laws because we start berating ourselves. We start cutting ourselves down by saying things like, well, I should be more grateful that they're not worse. And I've actually had women talk to me and say, well, my in-laws are not as bad as yours. The issues I have to deal with are not as bad as yours. Please don't say that. I am revoking your permission to think that just because my in-laws are further down the extreme scale than yours, it does not diminish what is happening to you. So I don't care if your in-laws only do 10% of the stuff that mine do. That's fine. That is toxic. That is possibly abusive. That is harmful to your family. You don't have to go to the extremes that we have had to go to in order to say, you know what? I've got a toxic situation here with my in-laws. So please, I revoke your permission. You're not allowed to say, well, at least mine are not as bad as yours, because everybody is affected by these people in different ways. And just because your situation might not be on paper as bad as mine is, first of all, mine wasn't always this bad. And it was still causing harm to me and my marriage and my children. Another thing you might be telling yourself about this lesser of the toxic in-laws is, well, they mean well. They're just caught in the middle. Well, they don't have to be caught in the middle. They don't have to be. But they're playing this balancing game to try to stay on the toxic one's good side, but they're not really being all that kind and charitable and healthy to you in the process. Or you might say things like, well, at least they tried to be nice to me. At least they try to be kind and generous to me. But is it really? Is that really what they're doing? And I know it seems awful to question the motives of someone, but it really does make you question it when you see this kind of behavior, when they know something is going on. Now, I will say with the situation with my in-laws, I do believe that my father-in-law has very little clue all the things that his wife has done. Yes, we've brought it up in court. Yes, we've mentioned it in emails, but I think he thinks that we're lying. I think he thinks that we're making it up. And so I don't think he realizes everything that's going on, but this idea that he's still trying to be nice while also ignoring our boundaries, it doesn't fit. There is a dissonance there. There is a disconnect there in this behavior. Now, these kinds of stories that we tell ourselves about how we should be grateful because it's not that bad, or they mean well, or they're trying to be nice, it keeps you from setting the appropriate boundaries that you need to set with all of your in-laws. And these kind of stories make you feel guilty when you expect to be treated better, or to be treated just with basic human kindness. But remember that just because you think somebody means well does not mean that you can excuse their harmful behavior. And if you have this sense of feeling guilty for expecting better treatment, my dear sister, that is a core issue that you need to resolve, because you are a child of God. He has chosen you. He has created you for this specific family that you have, meaning your children and extended family, and you have value, and you have an inherent right to be treated as an autonomous, independent human being who is created in the image and likeness of God. So if you feel guilty about wanting to be treated just with basic respect, please, please pray about that. Please seek spiritual direction. Please seek counseling or something to be able to get to the point where you can say to yourself, looking in the mirror, I deserve to be treated with love and respect and kindness. I deserve to be treated charitably by my in-laws. I pray that you will do that, because if you have this little voice, or maybe actually it's probably a very loud voice in the back of your mind that is screaming at you and telling you that you should be thankful that they treat you as well as they do, that you don't deserve to be treated any better because you're just worthless, or whatever it is, whatever those voices are in your head, I beg you to please seek someone out to help you erase those lies that the enemy has planted in your head. Please. We have to remember that these people, just because they are not as bad as the other, does not mean that they are treating you the way that you are supposed to be treated. And so we have to think, what kind of story am I telling myself that's keeping me stuck into this paradigm of thinking that it's not that bad. I don't deserve to be treated any better. Then we have this issue about this family system, this family culture that stays intact because both in-laws are playing roles in the same unhealthy system. You might have a situation where one plays bad cop and the other plays good cop. But here's the deal. They're both on the same team working towards the same goal. Now, we didn't necessarily have this good cop, bad cop kind of scenario, except for the fact that, when my husband would speak to his dad privately, that's what it felt like. It felt like his dad was being the rational one, the one who was trying to seek out peace, but then he would just turn it against him. It was like my father-in-law was just gathering evidence by playing the good cop to then feed it to the bad cop to then punish my husband. So this kind of dynamic keeps us off balance, and it prevents us from seeing what's actually going on clearly. The nice one will benefit from the toxic system just as much as the bad one. They just do it in a more quiet and sneaky and covert kind of way. So, where does this leave you? Well, it's tough. Because when you have one in-law that you kind of get along with, it really puts you in this tough situation because there are so many people that have this situation and they say, my husband does not want to cut off contact with his mom, even though his dad is just a nightmare. Or they don't want to cut off contact with the father-in-law because he's kind of been the nice guy. He hasn't done all the crazy things that the toxic mother-in-law did, but they're a package deal. And so how do you deal with that? Well, it's really, really hard. You and your husband have to make this difficult decision. Are you going to suck it up and deal with the toxic one just so you can have the semblance of a relationship with the not so toxic one? How does that work? And then we have to realize that the not so toxic one is enabling the sin of the more toxic one. I know that it is not our place to try to correct and fix our in-laws' marriage. It's not our place to do that for our parents. The only thing that we can do is make a decision for our own marriages and our own families. And if being around the lesser evil means that you also have to be with the more toxic one, that's just a really, really tough call. It's a really tough call. And it's almost an impossible call. And here's what, my husband and I have talked about, even in regards to his brother's family and sisters-in-law, and what we have kind of come to the conclusion is that we can't have a relationship with them. Partly because what that does is, number one, it totally ignores the fact that there is some serious dysfunction in the family. But number two, if we were to, let's say, get together with my husband's brother, and by some miracle, we don't talk about the issues that are going on with my husband and my brother-in-law's parents, then we know exactly what is going to happen the next time my brother-in-law has contact with his parents. He is going to be absolutely grilled forwards, backwards, inside out to find out exactly what happened during the meeting, exactly what happened during the conversation, what exactly was said, what is going on, did he get any intel on where our children are, and those kinds of things. And we've thought the same thing with my nieces and nephews. My nieces have reached out to my adult daughters, and they've really struggled because they would love to have a healthy relationship with their cousins. But at the same time, they don't want to put them in the situation that they know they would be put in by having contact with them because of how my mother-in-law is and how it seems that she just cannot stand that somebody has some information that she wants and she doesn't have it. So, for at least the time being, my daughters have chosen to not have contact with their cousins that are still in contact with my in-laws because of that very reason. Because they know that if my mother-in-law were to find out that my girls had contact with their cousins, she would quiz them to no end. And my girls don't want that. They don't want to subject their cousins to that kind of behavior. So while, usually I talk about in-laws being, father-in-law and mother-in-law, this definitely can extend to brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever. And usually that's what kind of happens. If you have a toxic person and they figure out that you were in touch with somebody else in the family, if you have gone no contact with your in-laws, they are going to find a way to get the information that they want. And that is really, really, really sad because they have created a culture where if you don't see things the way the toxic person sees them, then you are in the wrong and you will be ostracized and you will be punished for it. And we don't want that. We don't want my father-in-law to be punished for reaching out to my husband. We don't want my brother-in-law and his kids to be punished for reaching out to us. That's not right. That is enabling the sin of the highly toxic person. And yes, it's kind of in an indirect way, but we know based on past behavior that that is exactly what is going to happen. So as difficult as it is, we maintain a pretty strong boundary with all the extended family. As much as my husband would love to call and talk with his grandparents that are still living, he doesn't because he does not want them to be subjected to the interrogation by his mom. And so we just have to pray for them. We have to just know that at some point after we're all gone, that this will be made right and they will know the truth, that we did really want a relationship with them, but not if that meant that they would be interrogated by a highly toxic person. So this is a tough topic because it does seem to be that one in-law is not as bad as the other. And so you have to make these difficult decisions. And then I will say that after our hearing that we had this past June, it became painfully obvious that the lesser of two evils is actually just as bad as the highly toxic one. My father-in-law just had a much better way of hiding it and disguising it, but it was on full display in the courtroom this past June. And so I think I'm not alone in this. I think there are many of us who have these situations, and until something as intense as maybe a death, maybe as a hearing, maybe as a confrontation with law enforcement, until that happens, we still operate under this illusion that the other in-law is maybe not as bad. But in actuality, they can be just as bad. They're just wearing a different mask to hide it. So I hope for the listener who requested more information on, how we handle this, I hope that this has been helpful to you. And for those of you who are dealing with this, I hope that this kind of brings to light this very difficult situation that we have when we have two in-laws. One seems more toxic than the other, and we just struggle. This is not easy. We just struggle with how to deal with it in the most charitable and Christ-like way possible. And oftentimes, in these relationships, the most charitable thing to do is to put some distance between you and these toxic people so that you are not an instrument of enabling the near occasion of sin for your in-laws. God bless you. Go in peace. If you've been listening to this podcast thinking, finally, somebody gets it, well, I have got something for you. I just launched a brand new community called Catholic Wives Plus Toxic In-Laws, and it's exactly what it sounds like, a place where you can finally talk honestly about your in-law struggles without being told to just pray more or just let it go. This isn't another course that you have to complete. It's a community of women who will believe your story, who will validate your experience, and help you find peace without compromising your Catholic faith. Right now, founding members can join for only $7 a month, but that price is going to go up as more women join. So if you're tired of carrying this heavy, heavy burden alone, go to toxicinlaws.com and join us. Your peace is waiting inside. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.